Paul Arrington, you are back, my guy.
Matt Todd, I'm here.
We're here. We're talking
here.
water. So like a year ago when I went on the Nate Shellman show, he very kindly had me on. I think that was May, actually, because that was right around the time when the 3 busloads of illegal immigrants got dropped off at Fairview and 5 Mile. Right. That guy's writing policy now. Theo Wold, he's writing policy now for the U.S. Good times. Anyway, the point is great times. He had me on, and at the break, he's like, we come back. We're talking water. And that was literally the first introduction to the water problem I had in Idaho. Because again, I'm learning on the fly. And now here you are, president of the Water Users Association, chatting with me for the second time.
And in that window, I mean, you've talked to about everybody who's in the water industry. You probably know more than anybody else now.
I likely know more about water than somebody who's not direct related with the Department of Water Resource, the Water Board, or the water users. Like as a civilian, I think it'd be hard pressed to find somebody who knows more about it.
Right. That is very true. That is very true. I learned stuff when I listened to the episodes. Like, that was fascinating.
Fascinating. Has there been a resolution with the aquifer under not Mountain Home, but Moscow that's shared with the state of Oregon? Because like everybody's trying to recharge that, but nobody wants to do it.
Right. So, I mean, that's the funny thing. We talk a lot about water challenges, and the fights of the Eastern Snake Plain were top level, high level news, right? Because it was the insanity of the moment. Yeah, exactly.
The cobalt mines.
But if you go into Mountain Home, you go into Moscow, you go into other areas of the state, they're facing similar challenges. And there's not a solution yet. They're still studying, they're still working, they're still trying to find collaborative solutions to make sure that long into the future, their water supply can be sustainable.
Can we give a shout out to California for dropping its surface elevation several feet? Right. Because they just been like sucking the straw, and they are literally dropping the elevation of their Earth's surface because they're compressing the aquifer underneath them because they've pulled so much water. Let's not be them.
That's what happens when you don't regulate it, right? Yeah. And it literally subsided.
Do you think in like 100 years, and because I had somebody in here from the Idaho Conservation League earlier today, and John Oppenheimer, really enjoy him. Yep. He's a faster talker than I am.
That's saying something. That is saying something.
Watch the episode or listen, you will know. You'll have to play it at like 0.75 speed.
I usually play him at double speed. Am I going to have to slow it down?
Not this one, cowboy. Not this one. Even I like blacked out for a second. Yeah, he's great. But like a lot of information. We were talking about lodge poles and lumber and tree stands, the industry in eastern Idaho, timber industry, why it's no longer there at the same level it was, all these different things. And one big thing that he oriented me towards, he's like, listen, you got to consider the life cycle of these forests and these trees, not in like 10 years or 20 years, but like centuries or like multi-century problems. And, trees go through these different cycles, and forest fires have a place in that life cycle, big things like that. Do you think that like California is obviously growing a lot of food for the country and for the world, but do you think in like 100 years, it's going to be like, we used to have it and now we don't?
It makes you nervous, right?
A little bit.
It makes me, I remember in the first Trump administration, the commissioner for the Bureau of Reclamation her name is Brenda Berman.
Okay.
And she would come to our groups, and that's what she would say. She'd say, as you're trying to solve your problems, don't look to tomorrow. You need to solve the problems of 20, 30, 50 years from now. Because if you're just solving tomorrow's problems today, you're going to move past those so quick. Right. You gotta be thinking decades into the future as you're planning infrastructure, as you're planning how you're moving water around and the things you're doing. So you got to think ahead. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see in 100 years. You and I, let's do another episode in 100 years, and we'll say, this is what happened.
Yeah, I always thought the right answer was to create nuclear reactors close to the coast and use at least part of that power to pump the clean water that you get as a result of a nuclear reactor and steam, like inland.
There you go.
Now, obviously, that's not a popular answer. But I thought it was a great answer.
Well, hey, you know what? Necessity, the more immediate and the bigger the need, the more creative we're willing to be in terms of our solutions. So who knows? If the problem gets bad enough, maybe you'll just have a whole line of nuclear reactors.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I'm lining up a INL is giving me a tour, but they're not giving me like the tourist tour. Like initially, I had Lieutenant Governor Scott Becky in here, and he
Yep.
was like, "Oh yeah, I could get the director of INL." So INL, reaches out, their comms person, and then I had a Congressman Mike Simpson in here, and he was going on an INL tour. So then INL called. They're like, "Hey, listen, we were going to give you like the hour tour, but can you do like the 8-hour tour?" I was like, "Oh, I mean, yeah." And they reached out recently again. They're like, "Can you do a day and a half?"
A day and a half.
So I'm doing a multi-day tour. It's going to be, I'm literally going to take a notebook. It's like, okay, I'm not like, I'm going to try to absorb as much as I can here. Just go. But having the conversation around nuclear reactors and how Idaho has cutting edge nuclear reactors, how we can do them without having unlimited water sources like in the ocean, like all these different things is going to be wild.
And INL is an amazing place. The studies that they're doing are so far beyond nuclear. We'll go there, and they have a whole series of modeling and an internet of water, internet irrigation viz, or I think is what it's called, to help water users manage their system and understand their system better and understand what improvements are going to do for water supply and for seepage and for all these kinds of things. The scope of research that they're doing is incredible there. Incredible. God, I'm excited to hear how it goes.
Oh, I'm super pumped. And I'm hopeful that my real hope is that I'm smart enough to absorb the content that they're telling me in the day and a half and then be able to have meaningful conversations moving forward with them on the show, because there's so much background that I don't know. It's like, they don't want to waste their time showing me like a basic armbar. It's like, no, I got to get to the point where I'm like, we're hitting some advanced moves here.
Yeah.
And being able to bridge that gap from a dum-dum's understanding of what nuclear is to like, no, this is our cutting edge nuclear.
Yeah.
And this is why the country should no longer be terrified of nuclear, which I think most people are. They think there's just an inherent risk and damage that will be dealt to the environment if we engage in that type of power.
Oh yeah.
So speaking of information, there is a big concern over DOJ reducing the resources in Idaho to hydrologists and engineers.
Oh yeah.
How do you think that's going to affect water in Idaho?
Well, what's pretty fascinating as you think about water management in Idaho.
Yeah.
We're in the West. We're in dry country. Early, we were day 2 when we basically had built out all the infrastructure we could for the water supply we had. And from the earliest days of our state, the federal government has been a partner in our water management. From the 1800s, late 1800s, we're working with the federal government on USGS stream gauge monitoring. This is the data that tells us about the health of our rivers and our aquifer return flows and things like that. Reclamation came in and helped build all these dams and reservoirs along our system. They built entire irrigation systems. The Forest Service, which manages the watersheds, right? The forests are like our first reservoirs where that snow falls and accumulates and then flows into the rivers down to our reservoirs. You look at...
I'm sorry to interrupt. How does that relate to the forests?
How does that relate to the forest health?
No, you were saying the forest is our first
yes.
point. Like, how?
So in the mountains where our snow falls, the forests where our snow falls and it gathers there, and that, when you look at a forest, it essentially
sticks there.
Like that's where it sticks. That's where it accumulates. When you go up and ski up in the mountains, up in the forest, and it sticks there. And that watershed health is of premier importance. And so I've had a friend the other day ask me, why do water users care so much about forest fires? Just more than just, I hate smoke in the summer. It's because when the trees are up there, the snow falls and melts and manages in a certain way, and our system is built to catch that. And as you burn forests away, snow melts quicker, sedimentation in ponds and reservoirs, you have just new issues and new challenges. So we rely on the Forest Service as part of that forest management, forest health, to help make sure our initial water supplies in those forests in the forms of snow is healthy.
Yeah, I remember seeing this conservation cartoon when I was like a little kid, right, on TV, and it was essentially, portraying a bad cartoon representation of portraying what happens if you like lose trees, right?
Yeah,
all this water, and I suppose that's like if you have a ridgeline or a mountainous area that doesn't have foliage and doesn't have trees, as water accumulates and then washes away, if you don't have something keeping the soil and everything, like it will end up being this barren rock after, maybe not 2 years, maybe not 10 years, but after 100 years, you're not going to have anything up there because it's all going to be washed away because there will be no root system actually holding onto soil and distributing moisture appropriately.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you see, you know, we care here. We're very mindful. We're doing the work that we can as a water user community to support these efforts. But you look, you know, in California where they've had these record forest fires, you're seeing reservoirs literally fill up with sediment because as the snow melts, it's picking up sediment that it wouldn't have picked up before because of all the foliage there, and that's making its way to the rivers, which make its way to the reservoirs. And we had someone from from the Forest Service in California come to one of our events not too long ago and was showing pictures of a small reservoir, but one that was relied on by that community, literally full of sediment. And so now they're trying to figure out what to do because it's actually cheaper to build a new reservoir than it is to clean the sediment out.
Wow.
So these are all things. I mean, our partnership with the federal government in terms of how we manage and maintain our water, I mean, we are hand in hand as water users, as a state, and as a federal government. Yeah. And so it is unsettling maybe the right term?
That's an appropriate term?
I don't know. It's hard to know any day, you know, what's up, what's down, what's right, what's left. Because yesterday there's just a huge headline that, you know, the world is coming to an end. And then today we realize, well, maybe it's not as bad. And I try and keep in regular contact with my friends in these agencies, if nothing more than a mental health check, right? Because this is super stressful for everybody because there's just a high level of uncertainty. Volunteer, you know, you can voluntarily terminate your employment. Then there's reductions in force. And then there's another round of early retirements. And then there's, you know, potentially more reductions in force. And you hear numbers like 40% reductions required and things like this. There's a high level of uncertainty. And frustratingly, we don't know all the answers. And so the thing I have to tell and keep reminding myself, but also my members, is we've got to be patient. We can't overreact to each piece of news because give it an hour, give it a day, the news is different. And some employees are coming back, some employees are not. It's so unsettling.
Sure. And it goes back to the old thing, like make it as bad or as good as you want. Just make it that way and leave it that way, right?
Yeah.
Like let us predict so we can understand how to modify our systems appropriately and start. But when it's a moving target, even if you're like, well, we might make it better, it's like, just leave it one way or another. Stop messing with it so we can plan accordingly.
And I would say, I think the people that I represent, and I haven't asked all of them, but I've talked with many of them. Yeah. We fully get and support the need to make sure that the machine is well-oiled and efficient and that you cut the fat and the unnecessary things. And you're seeing a similar thing happening in our legislature here, where there's efforts to reduce budgets and reduce employees and reduce things. And there is a place for doing those efficiency improvements. But just because 2 is less than 4 doesn't mean 2 is better than 4. You've got to be mindful and thoughtful in what you're doing so that the backside is as good and, you know, fingers crossed, hopefully even better than what it was when you went in. And sometimes it's hard to feel like that's happening right now. But then again, sometimes it's hard to really know what is happening right now.
It's hard to know what's happening. Yeah, man. What a crazy time of the world we're in.
It's incredible. That's all I can say because I'm being recorded. Right.
We'll have drinks after.
We'll be honest later.
We'll get a quick one.
Yeah.
I had this really interesting conversation earlier today with this guy who's a civil and traffic engineer. Uh-huh. And we were talking about, I think it's SB 1140, which restricts any municipality, highway district, or city from engaging in improvements to any aspect of their sidewalk or streets unless the expressed and immediate benefit is to cars, right? And I'm screwing up the verbiage, but essentially it's like, unless it's justified to improve the life that a car experiences, you cannot do it. So for instance, if you want to put in a different, I don't know, you want to fill a gap in a sidewalk, or you want to add a sidewalk, or if you want to add a bike lane or something like that, you can't do any of that. And by the way, the punishment is like $1,000 fine and 90 days in prison or something, like or jail. Like you do jail time if you're like, Ada County Highway District. And I'm trying to understand this.
Yeah.
What is the nature of, why does this anxiety necessitate a state law? If people don't like the decisions that ACHD is making, then we can vote out our commissioners and we can do other things. But very specifically, like, why does it matter to somebody in like Rigby? Or like, why does this matter? Why should we make a law for somebody in Coeur d'Alene? Like, shouldn't we allow municipalities to do what the municipalities want? And the answer is no, we shouldn't. Stemming from, at least in part, anxieties of what we see around us,
yep.
which is
Yep.
Coastal states that are in very large urban areas making curious decisions that are seemingly not geared around the benefit of motorized vehicles. And it's like, wow, man, like seeing it freaks people out.
Yeah. There have been a couple times this session where you look at stuff that's being proposed and you're like, wait a minute here. Are families really sitting around the table worried about this? Is this really what Idahoans are worried about? And sometimes it's easy to be confused.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you.
It's easy.
I'm going to tell you right now, the thing I'm worried about, I went and got a coffee with my wife yesterday.
Yeah.
And each coffee was $6.50.
Yep.
And it was only this big. And then we went into down after I got like, from my heart attack, I recovered. I was like, oh my God. I was like, well, how about like, let's drive around, drink our coffees, and let's get I don't want to go out to lunch. Let's not do a full lunch. Cause first off, I'm not that hungry. Second, I don't have $50.
Yeah.
I was like, why don't we just get a sandwich at the sandwich shop in town? And she was like, okay, great. We go. And it's a $12 sandwich. And I shit you not, Paul, it was this big. It was on 2 normal slices of bread. Now, mind you, pork was very delicious. That was on the inside of it. But I was like, this cannot be happening. I feel like I'm 18 again, and like money's everything seems like monopoly money. It's how could anybody ever make this much money? Like when you first saw your parents' credit card bill, or like you first realized
right?
how much like it costs to rent a house or something. You're like, how could anybody in the world ever make this much? Like $2,000 a month? Are you insane? Nobody, like, Warren Buffett doesn't make and now, dude, I have the same anxiety. It's like, who could afford a $12 sandwich that's not like a 3-foot long sandwich and a coffee that's this big? Like, what's happening?
My wife and I actually have this conversation a lot. Like, our youngest, our baby, is a senior this year, and we have 4 kids, 17 to 25. And that's my thought. It's like, what is the world my kids are coming into? How are they ever going to be able to afford a home? We've been fortunate to be able to afford a home, and I just wonder how. How are you going to be able to afford a home? How are you going to be able to afford even just a few fun things in life, whether it be your cup of coffee or whatever it is? How are you? It's the type of things that parents stay up late worrying about for their kids.
This was my exact concern with the sandwich. Like, I have the $12. Now I'm not going back, but like I have the $12, right? Like, and I have the $6.50, not going back.
Yeah.
But I have that. My in-laws were in town. Okay. Like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And, for one of my son's birthdays, he really likes Chipotle. I'm like, all right, we'll give him Chipotle.
Yeah.
It's his birthday dinner.
Yeah.
No
Why
problem.
not?
Dude, 4 adults and 3 kids. Okay. And the kids, by the way, I'll tell you what I get the kids. I get a bowl and I'm like, put 2 giant sides of white rice in there. I get another bowl, put 2 giant sides of black beans in there, and I got 3 quesadillas. That's it. And then we mix all the black beans.
Yep.
I get them a side of guac. They love it, right?
Yep.
I want you to guess how much that bad boy costs. Just stab in the dark.
Well, my first guess is that you had like triple meat on your burrito.
Nope. First off, I get a bowl, you animal. I got a bowl. I'll tell you, it was over $100.
For 7 people.
For 4 adults.
And 3 kids.
And 3 children that got
over
4 sides
$100.
collectively. You want to know why? My in-laws got guac. You never get guac if somebody's buying you burrito. You know that guac is like 50% of the cost of the entire meal. You never get guac, and they both ordered it.
The real rule is you never take your in-laws to a restaurant that allows you to add add-ons to the meal. You failed because you took your in-laws to the restaurant.
Listen to me. First off, I didn't take them. I was texted the order by my wife, and I picked it up.
Touche.
I followed the instructions as they were laid out. You of all men should understand
that was an impossible situation. You were in an impossible situation. I get it.
All right, listen, we come back to water.
Yeah.
Water was a big question. I met with a lot of people at the beginning of the session, and the governor had laid out a request for $30 million of ongoing appropriation to increase water research and understanding. Well, that's, hydrologists, analytics, data. We're not going to solve this problem just by staring at it with our eyeballs. We need hard data.
Yep.
We got that.
Well, we're almost there. Right. We're getting close. And this has been, when as a water user community, we came in with, probably we 15 or so bills that we engaged on, but really two major priorities this year. And one of those was to support governor's Keeping Promises plan that included $30 million ongoing, not just 1 year, but ongoing funding for water projects throughout Idaho. And that's hard. That's hard any year in Idaho because we are a very conservative state that prides ourselves on fiscal responsibility. And this year in particular, because there's a growing voice in our legislature that is advocating for cutting spending and cutting employees. And there are certain legislators who've vowed not to support any budget over like a 1.2. I may be wrong, but fairly modest. There's the
there
word.
She is.
There she is. A fairly modest increase, and not to support any budget that included additional employees. And so it was a heavy lift from day one, right? And there were all sorts of questions. Where should this money go? Should it be spread throughout all the state, or should it, in particular in year one, go to really focus on efforts to help achieve the success of that 2024 settlement agreement and mitigation plan that they reached for the Eastern Snake Plain? And I'll tell you, until about 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, it was sketchy. And we got to a point where, okay, we think we've got the $30 million, but it's only going to be for 1 year. So we're going to have to go have a political fight every single year over whether we should spend money to keep our water supplies sustained. And then finally,
maybe just every 4 years.
Right.
Don't make me fight don't make me fight every dinner.
Yeah.
I'll fight on Thursdays and every other Sunday. Just don't make me fight every day.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I'll tell you, the water community really stood up on this and came out and said, hey, this is important for us. And finally, about 2.5 weeks ago, so early March, it broke free. And we were able to finally find some movement on getting $30 million ongoing. And so JFAC approved that budget here about a week and a half ago. House Bill 445 was on the House floor this morning.
Nice.
And 90 minutes of debate. I mean, it was a robust debate, but I'd say 80 to 85% of it was in favor of this. And those are opposed were really just similar kind of fiscal conservativeness. We need to be mindful, but 85% in favor, and it passed 56-13 today. So we're pretty excited.
Congratulations, sir.
And then now it moves to the House, now it moves to the Senate. And we're cautiously optimistic.
Fingers crossed. You know what I've been wondering about? How to address people, and not that I know the right thing to do, but I almost feel like the idea for people that are fiscally conservative, everybody gets together. It's like, okay, we have no more police force. It's gone. Okay. So we can't improve efficiency because there is nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, should we have a police force? If the answer is yes, we should. Okay. At what level?
What does it look like?
Right.
Yeah.
Because then it would give you a target that everybody would agree on, which is like, we need police at this level right here. The reason that would be valuable is because we have an existing police force, and it seems that there is at least some number of legislators that are like, hey, look, we need to save money at all costs. It's like, okay, but is it really at all costs? Because if we go to zero, do you want to add something back in? And that would at least give a target for, okay, we all agree if we had no police force, this is the base level of police, like the lowest we could go. And that then was like, okay, we don't spend any money over this absolute base level to produce this result.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but we got to get to the result target first.
We do. It is a tough conversation with water. Water is a property right, and it's different than like your property right in the dirt that you own, right? A water right is a right to use a shared resource of the state. And so even in our Constitution, it recognizes that the state can regulate and can put some level of oversight over the use of water. Even though it's a property right, the Constitution recognizes that there's regulation of that. And so then the balance becomes, okay, the state is regulating this, the state is monitoring this to some extent. The challenges we're having, if you're going to point fingers, it's not healthy to do so, but if you're going to, you can point them to probably about everybody, including the state. And so everybody needs to lift in order to solve these challenges we're having. You look at the money that has been given to the state so far, or that the legislature has appropriated for water so far. One of the things it's used for is to address aging infrastructure challenges. In the last 3 years, $56 million in grants have gone out for aging infrastructure projects, worth over $250 million. So almost a 5-to-1 return on this. One of the things we heard on the floor today was, it was an interesting comment. The comment was, ag economy in Idaho brings in $4.3 billion.
Okay.
Farmers are raking in $4.3 billion. They should just fix all of these problems themselves, essentially. Raking in this money. And you just have to say, wait a minute. Well, first of all, that
shouldn't
totally,
be hauling in?
totally misunderstands the finances of it. But to me, the biggest challenge there was this assumption that we're asking the state to do everything, when in reality, $30 million, excuse the pun, and Representative Raybould, I think, used this on the floor today, is a drop in the bucket of what this costs. That is a help from the state, and then there is help from the federal government, and then there is a significant amount of money put in by the private citizens, by whether it be the delivery entities themselves or the farms or partnerships with like the Nature Conservancy to do certain projects. And so the source of funding for these projects that are incredibly expensive comes from all over. And this $30 million is a big piece of it, and is, we think, necessary.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
It's like, when you talk about water rights, I may or may not be looking at a property for my own personal purchase right now it does not have a water right, but it does have a well. So I run off a well, or I would be theoretically. It also has an abandoned well. How does that work? Like, I'm tapped into the ground. Does anybody like regulate my water consumption? Like, I can just take as much water out of the ground as I can get, right?
This could not be a better segue to our other priority of the year. But what you've probably got on there, and I can show you offline how to research and search to find out for sure.
And if you have an abandoned well, can I just like tap that bad boy again?
You'd have to do some research to understand exactly what happened there. But more likely than not, what you've got there is what's called a domestic well.
Okay.
And so under Idaho law, you have to get a water right if you're going to use water for any purpose.
Okay.
And that is go to the department, file an application. You can be challenged. There can be lawsuits. You can go to court. I mean, it's a process depending on where you're at. But a long time ago, the legislature said, wait a minute here. In Idaho, we love the lightest touch of government, freedom and property rights, America. And they said an exception to this, an exception to this general rule is for domestic uses. So if you want to go and build your home, homestead your little plot of land, or cut the corner off for your kids to come build, then you shouldn't have to be facing those same rigmarole, so to speak. And so the domestic exemption was enacted, which says if you've got one home, no more than 1/2 acre of irrigation, so your lawn, your landscaping, your garden, and no more than 13,000 gallons a day, which is a lot of water. In the summer, it's probably still a little more than you would need, but 13,000 is a lot. If you check all of those boxes, all 3 of them have to be checked, less than 13,000, half acre or less, and a home, then you can use the water, drill the well, and use that water without getting a water right. And it's a great, convenient thing for water, for water use and for development. And here's the reality, you know, when you go to certain areas of the state, it is nearly impossible to get a new water right. It's very, very hard. You have to provide mitigation to offset any impacts on the water supply, and those kinds of things. So it's really hard. And if you're going to build, say, a subdivision and put in a community well, a community well is really, really expensive, and you have to get permitting from DEQ. And unless you have a certain number of homes, it's really tough to make it pencil out for that development. And so what you've seen over the years is more and more development subdivisions will come in, and instead of fighting those fights, they put individual domestic wells at every home. So it's not uncommon in areas of the state to have a 20, 40, 50, 70. I talked to somebody last week with a 200 lot subdivision, and the idea is to put an individual well at each and every lot. And those wells are not managed. There's no oversight. There's no administration. You don't have to have a water right. And while that is extremely convenient and extremely helpful, our folks have said, and we've been working on this for about 3 years, that wait a minute here. When you consider the money that we're spending, you consider last year wells were being red tagged and farms were being told they had to shut down, when across the street you had thousands of homes that were junior in priority, you know, came in after the fact.
Right, built in 2000.
Continuing to go and had zero risk. Our folks said, we got to do some things just a little bit different. And so we started 3 years ago, actually. Senator Harris from Southeast Idaho called me in and said, Paul, I've got this problem. How do I solve it? And it really sparked which for me, in my time, I'm about 8 years in this gig, about almost 20 years as an attorney doing water stuff. For me, probably the most collaborative experience I've had, working with cities and counties and home builders and realtors and water users and agencies and a couple other random people who just showed up at the meeting because they're water nerds, I guess, right? And just worked and said, okay, how do we find a solution that may not be what the water users exactly want and may not be what the cities exactly want, but how do we find a solution?
Right, because look, no developer wants to go through the hassle of dealing with getting a water right if they can just pump a well everywhere. Yeah, maybe expensive, pass the bill off to the homeowner. And the ag community is like, wait a minute, why am I bending? Like, I'm just going to buy one of those houses and just hose over the water to my house.
Yeah, it's tough. So we were able to get something. Senate Bill 1083 went through this year and went through overwhelmingly. And I'll say it was a very collaborative process. We weren't ultimately able to get everybody in our group on board with it, but we got a critical mass, and it was enough for the legislature to pass it with some meaningful, very surgical changes.
Okay, so let's talk about did this already get signed by the governor?
Yep.
Okay.
It's the law of the land.
HB 1083? No,
1083.
SB
1083.
I was going to say four digit. That's a Senate. Okay, talk to me. What did this do?
So one other piece of background on this. You know, as we talk about, you know, our folks are concerned because of all the challenges we're facing with our water supply. Over the last 20 years, 55,000 domestic wells have gone in Idaho. 55,000. And if you consider that each allows up to a half acre of irrigation, that's as many as 27,500 acres of unregulated use. At a time when in the ESPA, the Eastern Idaho or Mountain Home, or here in the Boise, in the Treasure Valley, and all throughout the state, even up north, we're facing challenges with our health of our aquifers. And so we said we got to do some things differently. So we talked for 4 years.
Pass me that little mic off your thing.
Uh-oh,
No, you didn't do anything wrong. I've done so many interviews today that the battery on the backup mic died, and I hate having that little green light flash in my face. There we go.
Listen to you. I'm such a big deal. I talked to so many people today.
I'm absolutely not, because you want to know what?
Technology.
I didn't bring anything valuable to the table. I'm just the I'm just the idiot with the equipment. It's not like 5 people had me on their shows to like say what I know. Cause guess what, Paul? I don't know anything.
No.
That's why you're here, my guy.
This is what, yeah, that's what the obscure local podcast, right?
God bless those people. I was explaining this to somebody because recently, like, wait, why is the local news being not cool with you? And I'm like, well, look, you can come up with a lot of different reasons, but one in particular is that the local news sources overwhelmingly have taken one view of what's going on with West Ada.
Yep.
West Ada has acted in error. Now, whether you think that or not is irrelevant to me. It doesn't matter. But to perpetuate that story, they have to say that West Ada's response was wholly insufficient. So they can't say like West Ada did this terrible thing and then they went on this great local podcast that the governor goes on and everybody else goes on. They have to be like, they went on a podcast that nobody even knows about.
This obscure local podcast.
Obscure, right-winging, semi-political.
Those are the only podcasts I will ever agree to go on. The obscure local ones. There's... Yeah.
God bless you. Is there a water users podcast? Like, is there like a Western water user podcast that talks about water challenges or?
But I got a member who thinks we should do one and thinks my program manager should be in charge of it.
Don't listen to me. I'll tell you right now. Don't do one.
Deal.
Just have a regular sitting on my show. You won't have the burden of carrying the show. You won't have the burden of producing it. I will put and then you just send out the link and you guys can come because I love hearing every time I talk to somebody about water. Yeah. I love it. So it's like, let's just have like an every month or every other month.
You can happen.
Help me get whatever guest you want. I've already had like half the water board.
That's you really have had a lot. Yeah.
There's three water board members, Lieutenant Governor Betke, you, but
the obscure local guy on the obscure local podcast.
God bless you. I'm sorry. I interrupted you. Okay.
No, you're good.
So SB 1083.
SB 1083. So we're talking for 3 years. And again, we had this huge group. And we really over time identified 4 things that were concerns.
Great.
That folks identified. And so this bill did 4 things.
Great.
Number 1, I told you this concern about, hey, why are we allowing this growth to be unfettered?
Sure.
When we're facing so many challenges.
Sure.
So the first thing the bill did was say in areas where we know that there are problems with the water supply, with the aquifer, there's certain designations that the state will make for those areas. In those areas, the domestic exemption only applies in-home. So you can wash your clothes, cook your food, bathe, whatever.
You cannot have a half-acre garden.
But if you're going to irrigate, and this is in subdivisions, right? This isn't for everybody. This is just in subdivisions. If you're going to have common areas and lawns and landscaping and all of that you normally have in a subdivision, then you got to get a water right like every other use in that area. And in an area where the aquifer is struggling, like we know because it has received those designations.
Like in Mountain Home.
Yeah. Then that just makes sense, right? You can still build your home. You can still go in and you can do all that you need to do in the home. But in terms of that irrigation use, that outside use, which is really what the consumptive use is, that's what really impacts the water supply. You just got to play by the same rules as everybody
Understood.
else.
Okay, so that's 1.
Number 2, under the current rules, under the current statute, if I've got a subdivision with 5-10 homes and I want to put in and I want to take advantage of the domestic exemption, I have to drill 5 or 10 individual wells. I have to put 10 holes in the ground. And that's concern for a lot of reasons, not, including these are unregulated holes, and that's 10 new holes that provide 10 new potential opportunities for contamination in an aquifer.
Sure.
It's more expensive. And really, particularly for the in-home use, which is considered non-consumptive, it doesn't make sense. And so number 2 would be for the in-home uses, you can combine multiple homes into one well.
And to be clear on this with the contamination, which is something I didn't understand, until like 6 months ago, it's like you essentially, once you break the skin barrier of the surface of the earth, you really risk injecting things like bacteria, diseases, petroleum products, things like that. That's the big problem with the injection well systems that people are really worried about. Hey, look, we're going to be shooting stuff directly down into the aquifer, whereas normally whatever gets to the aquifer through seepage would have to go through hundreds of feet of, rock and charcoal and all that stuff.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And that's why a community well, for example, is so rigorous, right? Because they want to make sure not only is it healthy for the people drinking the water, but also that it adequately protects the aquifer.
Water resource. Got it. Okay. So you can combine And in designations, you got to get a water right for outside stuff.
outside use. Yeah.
Understood. Number three,
the question.
I love this. I'm so happy this is because like I came in, I was like, I have this question that's
trying
a real
to keep
question.
this as simple as we
No,
can,
you're
right?
good.
Yeah. Number three was, one of the questions that came up often was, why doesn't the Department of Water Resources just enforce the exemption? If you think there are problems with it, if you think, everybody knows somebody. There's Earl down the road who's irrigating 15 acres with his domestic well, right? I mean, dang Earl. And so...
But he does bring the corn on 4th of July. On 4th of July, he hooks it up.
Yeah, exactly. So, so the problem, why doesn't the department just enforce it? And as we dug into that, we learned that existing code is really onerous. It takes days to research one, domestic overuse claim. And these overuse claims are like, I'm allowed to irrigate a half acre, but I'm irrigating a full acre. It takes them forever. And then at the end of the day, the maximum penalty under the code is $300.
I like the way you're talking. Keep going.
Right. And so
that's what it used to be.
That's what it used to be.
Oh, damn it.
Most people would say exactly that. Oh, you're telling me I can just pay you $300?
Is this an annual thing?
Yeah.
You don't get it weekly, do you?
No, it's annual, right? And so you're like, so we did create a new section that is much more streamlined with penalties that are much more conducive with, encouraging compliance, shall we say?
More of a deterrent?
More of a deterrent.
How dare you? God.
I know, we're horrible like that. And then last but not least, things we heard from our local communities where we don't feel like our code is clear enough in terms of what authorities we have as it relates to water management and development and growth. And so we went in they kind of helped lead this charge to go in and clean up some of their code and just provide some clarity in terms of what authorities the cities and counties have in terms of considering water supplies as they plan for growth, in terms of looking at plans to, developments in terms of authorizations and zoning decisions. So, but it passed overwhelmingly in the House and in the Senate, largely because we had a great coalition of collaborative folks and largely because we were very surgical. Like if my folks would have written this bill, it's very likely that it could have been just one line. There shall be no more domestic exemption. Every use in Idaho requires some water right record. Sure. When we're facing the challenges we are, spending the money that we are, it makes sense to those of us who live in this world that every use, regardless of what it is, should have a record and should have some level of oversight. That's bridge too far for some of the folks in our collaborative group. And so we were able to find a path that will do some meaningful change in Idaho, I think, moving forward. So we're excited. So those were the two big things. The money and this awesome. Domestic exemption bill are two things, both of which are going to be, I think they're going to have real lasting benefits for Idaho and its water long into the future. That's
wonderful. And is there any, and I know this sounds crazy to ask, is there any like auxiliary water service? For instance, if I had some, say I had like a water tower, like a mini water tower on my property. Is there like a private industry option where it's like, okay, I want more water than that then can be supplied by my domestic well to do whatever I may want to do with it. Yeah. Aside from getting a water right, which sounds unlikely, are there any other services or is there any other mechanism to get like additional water to the property?
I mean, there might be in your area. You'd have to look and see if there were any suppliers around or neighbors who had water right that had extra usage that they didn't use. I mean, there's options out there.
Gotcha. Man, these are.
I'm billing you for these legal answers, though. By the way,
appreciate it. You're not a board certified attorney.
You're right. I can't represent anymore.
No, you can't. Don't be giving me legal advice right now, Paul. Paul, I didn't call you Paul Arrington Esquire.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just a dude who trains at jiu-jitsu gym with me. You're just a dude.
A random obscure guy. Random obscure guy.
God bless it, man. Oh, I got to tell you, I'm very excited for the governor campaign interviews next year because one thing it's going to be fantastic because one thing I'm going to do 100%. I've been planning this out for like a couple weeks now, realizing this is coming, is I'm going to get together with you and then like the Farm Bureau and, Idaho Power.
Just different folks and
every single agency and just for like a day, be like, listen, download everything.
Yeah.
Tell me like all the deets, and then roll into those interviews with the governor candidates and be like, you better have a brown bag lunch because we're going to be here for a while.
We're going to be here for a while.
Just unlimited time, and then
unroll and scroll your questions.
Distribute them over like a 4-part series.
There you go.
So it's like part 1, forestry, part 2, power.
Oh man, that'll be great.
Oh,
that'll be good.
Yeah, it's going to be super cool. But it's the expertise that you bring. You know, obviously this is our second interview, and I've very much had the pleasure and luck to have these conversations with other people. And now it's like, even in a rudimentary way, if I had the conversations now, I'd be armed with a dump truck of information.
Yeah.
And these are things that the state of Idaho need to know. Like the citizens in Idaho need to consider this stuff. I don't know what the right answer is to anything. That's the benefit of being me.
Key.
I have no burden of being right ever because I don't take a position. But man, it's going to be great. Listen, Paul, I know it's a working day for you. Thank you for coming in, sir.
Hey, thank you for the invite.
Did we miss anything?
Well, let me just say really quick,
please.
In terms of that domestic exemption, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, you know, one of the things that often came up on that bill was, wait a minute here, in Idaho, domestic use is less than 2%. Why are we changing the rules for such a small, inconsequential amount of water? Why doesn't ag, frankly, take care of this problem? Because ag and ag-related industries are 90+%.
Can I take a stab at this?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So first off, if you're looking at a very specific area, that aquifer might be more unduly taxed by domestic wells, right? Yep. So if you're looking at, as you're putting it, a specific designation of water scarcity, then you may not be looking at you may be looking at 15 or 20%, which disproportionately affects ag, and you can't ask ag to reduce its consumption by, another 20%. So this is not everywhere. Yes, the average of the state might be 2%, but it's not everywhere that you're asking for people to take that consideration with having to go water right if you want to do outside common space landscaping. The second thing is, I don't care who you are, you do not want to damage the aquifer either by chemicals or by accidental drilling. So no matter what, if you're going to have a common well as opposed to a dozen or more wells, that's beneficial for everyone across the board. What was the third one we did?
The third thing would be, first of all, well done. You've done what the student becomes the master. The third one would be that ag is already doing it. I mean, ag is doing it.
No. What was the third consideration? I hit the common wells. I hit the designation places where you have to get.
That would be the enforcement.
Oh, the enforcement.
Yes.
Yeah. Listen, what's the point in having a law if you don't have enforcement?
Yes.
Then it's just a piece of paper that means nothing to anyone. Like, Come on, man. Like, you got to have something with teeth if you're actually going to affect any kind of meaningful behavioral change.
Amen.
But there were 4 things.
And then the fourth thing was the
just
city,
streamline it. Okay.
City efforts.
Dude, see, there we go. I got it.
There you go.
I'm telling you, I learned about this today right now. And
I got it.
See, I learned real fast.
There you go. Before too long, you won't be obscure anymore.
No, I'll still be obscure. It's funny. I don't think many people know my name. That's the funny thing. People understand the ranch, but they don't even know who I am, which is fine with me because I don't do an introduction like, this is Matt Todd.
Can we repeat this whole interview and I'll just say Matt Todd the whole time? Well, Matt Todd, good question, Matt Todd.
Oh my God.
Let me answer that, Matt Todd.
I get so uncomfortable when people are like, what do you think, Matt? I'm like, oh God, I just fucking calm down, man. I shouldn't swear. We're talking about water. Listen, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were saying?
No, everything you said is exactly right. The only other thing I would add is ag is doing work.
Right.
Ag, I mean, you can't watch the fretting and the circumstances of the last year and say, well, ag isn't doing their part. They're doing a lot. They're spending a ton of money, a ton of fret, a ton of time, a ton of headache.
The resources
solve
involved,
these problems, and this is an opportunity to make sure that everybody who is contributing to the challenges, even if it is in a small way, is also then contributing to the solutions as we're trying to make a better future for us.
Yeah, man. I was at the Farm Bureau convention in December, and I popped into the water workshop, and there are people really trying to understand the regulations, abide by the regulations, find solutions to the problems that the regulations present, including different crop rotations and working with your surrounding area. It's like, okay, so you're not all doing the heavy water thing in the same year and blah, blah, blah. Like, people are trying really hard, and that's really important. And I do appreciate that in the state, you don't, like you're saying, hey, look, even in areas with designations that are where water scarcity is a problem, even there, we're not coming for your laundry.
Yeah.
We're not coming for your dishwasher. We're not coming for your shower. We're not coming for your shower heads and your toilet tanks and all of these things. Like, yeah, you want a nice big green lush lawn, go out and get something else. Like, we have limitations ultimately in certain areas of the state with houses that are going up in the future. I don't know what to tell you. If you're moving here into a new home, you're in the arid West and it's an ag state. So buyer beware. Like, you understand beforehand. But dude, like, come on. That seems totally reasonable.
Makes sense to me.
Makes sense to me.
And it apparently made sense to the legislature, thankfully. So
God bless America, Paul.
Amen.
Thank you for coming in. So let's do this again.
Amen.